First class wasn't supposed to feel like second-class dignity. When Nathaniel Carter sliced into his entree with polished grace, he didn't expect green mold to greet him beneath the lemon glaze. The flight attendant didn't flinch. "That's what's on the menu," she said, lips twitching into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her tone said more than words. "You don't belong here." Nathaniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't call for a manager. He simply looked up, brows furrowed, hands steady, and made one silent note. A note that would eventually cost 3 careers, shake an entire airline, and ignite a corporate reckoning 35,000 feet above ground. Nathaniel Carter sat with impeccable posture, the kind that came not from pride, but from habit. At 42, he'd learned that poise often deflected scrutiny better than credentials. Wearing a fitted charcoal blazer over a crisp, unbranded white shirt, he looked like any consultant on a last-minute client trip, unassuming, composed, forgettable by design. The flight to Chicago had barely leveled out when the meal service began in first class. A tray slid onto the linen-covered table in front of him, lemon-glazed chicken with sautéed asparagus. It looked decent at a glance. But as Nathaniel cut into the breast with practiced precision, a thin line of green spread revealed itself beneath the surface. Mold. Faint but unmistakable. He paused, tilted his head, blinked once. Then came the voice. "That's what we have, sir." Lindsay Marks stood at his side, tray in hand, apron neat, smile tightly wound. Her eyes didn't meet his. They hovered around his collar, his hands, the napkin in his lap, as if scanning for confirmation that he didn't belong here. Her expression wasn't one of apology. It was rehearsed indifference mixed with something colder. Dismissal. Nathaniel looked up slowly. His eyes, steady, unfazed, locked onto hers. No furrowed brow, no confrontation. Just stillness. "Is it customary?" he asked, voice calm as snowfall. "For the first-class menu to include penicillin?" Lindsay blinked. Her lips twitched. "It's lemon glaze, sir. Not everything green is bad for you." The comment wasn't for him. It was for the nearby passengers. Subtle, performative, calculated. A few turned to listen. One man in 3C chuckled under his breath. Nathaniel didn't flinch. "I see," he said. With the edge of his knife, he gently lifted a piece of the chicken onto the bread plate. Then he reached for a cloth napkin, dabbed the corners of his mouth, and made a single, precise note in the leather-bound portfolio at his side. Lindsay tilted her head. "Would you prefer the vegetarian option instead?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced out the window at the cloudscape stretching below, peaceful, detached. Then, looking back at her, he said, "No, thank you. I've already received everything I need." The words landed oddly, cordial but final. Lindsay lingered for a moment, clearly unsure whether she'd won that exchange or walked into something she didn't understand. Eventually, she pivoted and walked off, the soft click of her heels drowned in the ambient hum of the engines. Nathaniel closed his portfolio. In row 5A, a teenage girl lifted her phone discreetly, camera pointed forward. Her screen read, "Going live." Nathaniel adjusted the angle of the tray with quiet deliberation, then lifted his phone and snapped 2 photos of the chicken. No flash, no fuss. One wide shot, one close-up of the mold veins. He saved the images into a locked folder labeled QA Field Log and placed the phone screen down beside his glass of sparkling water. He reached for a silver pen tucked into the seam of his leather portfolio and, with elegant strokes, began noting details beneath a column titled Incident Record. His handwriting was compact and clear, just like his demeanor. No raised voice, no offended tone, just documentation. From across the aisle, Lindsay Marks pretended to check the overhead bin, though her glance kept drifting back to him. He wasn't yelling, wasn't agitated. That unsettled her more than if he had been. She was used to irate passengers she could label as disruptive. This man was giving her nothing. Nathaniel made no move to signal a flight attendant, no request for a replacement meal, just silence, as though the issue was already dealt with in his mind. He clicked his pen shut, placed it precisely across the portfolio, and leaned back ever so slightly. In 5A, Sierra Lin noticed the tension. At 17, she developed an instinct for moments that meant something, especially ones that didn't look dramatic at first. She was on her way to a journalism summer program, and her phone was already filled with practice footage. Airport delays, quirky gate agents, even a lost kid reunited with his parents. But this was different. Subtle, charged. She opened her camera, tapped "Go Live," and whispered, "Just first-class things." Only 3 viewers popped in, her cousin, a classmate, and a random bot. She adjusted her phone slightly, trying to angle it where both Nathaniel and Lindsay might be visible if things escalated. Meanwhile, Lindsay returned to the galley, visibly agitated. "Something wrong with 1B?" asked Deborah Wells, the head flight attendant, while stirring cream into her coffee. "He's just cold," Lindsay muttered. "Not complaining, not friendly, just taking notes, like he's auditing us or something." Deborah raised an eyebrow. "Taking notes?" Lindsay shrugged. "You know the type. Think they're owed extra because they're in first, just waiting to pounce." Back in 1B, Nathaniel tapped into his phone briefly. Not to email, not to message, but to open a secure, offline note app. He uploaded the photos with timestamps. Beneath the images he typed, "Observe further, maintain standard posture, no premature action." Then he locked the phone, set it face down again, and resumed his calm posture. Around him, flight attendants moved briskly, passengers sipped wine, and the engine hum continued. But a different current was building. One of attention, friction, and the first quiet whispers of something beginning to unfold. Lindsay returned to seat 1B, holding a folded napkin between 2 fingers, her steps deliberate, her smile sharper than before. "Here you go," she said sweetly, placing the napkin on Nathaniel's tray like a peace offering dipped in sarcasm. "Don't want stains on your uniform, do we?" Nathaniel glanced at the cloth, then at her face. Her tone carried something beneath its surface, something more deliberate than customer service. He didn't respond. Silence, once again, did more than words. Lindsay lingered. "We've had a few catering hiccups lately," she said, her voice pitched just loud enough for neighboring passengers to hear. "Sometimes passengers think first class comes with perfection, but really, it's all just food on a plane, right?" Her smile never wavered, but her eyes searched his reaction, looking for a flinch, a spark, something she could pounce on. Nathaniel gave her none. She leaned in a little. "You know, I double-checked the manifest. I almost walked right past you at boarding because I didn't expect..." She trailed off, letting the sentence hang. "Well, I just thought maybe you were headed for business or economy. Common mistake." The man in 2A turned his head slightly. A woman across the aisle raised an eyebrow. The atmosphere shifted, subtly but undeniably. Nathaniel placed his napkin on the tray with the same precision as before, then looked up. His voice remained low and even. "I appreciate your concern for the integrity of my wardrobe." Lindsay laughed, forced and too loud. "Oh, I'm just teasing. It's good to have a sense of humor on long flights." As she turned to leave, she nearly bumped into Deborah Wells, the head flight attendant, who had arrived just in time to hear the tail end of the exchange. "Everything all right here?" Deborah asked, her tone light but firm. Lindsay nodded. "Absolutely, just helping our guest get comfortable." Nathaniel didn't say a word. Deborah gave him a quick glance, neutral, polite, then focused back on Lindsay. "You've got beverage service next, don't you?" "Yes, just wrapping this up." As they walked away together, Deborah leaned in. "Let's keep things professional, okay?" "I am being professional," Lindsay said under her breath. "He's just got an attitude." Deborah didn't respond. But as she looked over her shoulder toward 1B, she noted the way Nathaniel sat. Still, composed, watching without watching. Not angry, just aware. In 5A, Sierra's live stream ticked past 20 viewers. The chat started picking up. Why is she talking to him like that? That tone, though. Someone get the airline's Twitter handle. Nathaniel slowly closed his portfolio, folded his hands in his lap, and waited. He wasn't in a rush, not yet. Nathaniel reached into his blazer with the calmness of a man retrieving a pen. But instead, he pulled out a sleek, matte black phone, unbranded, business issued. No facial expression changed. He didn't sigh or shake his head. He simply unlocked the device with a thumbprint and pressed a single contact labeled Z. He held it to his ear. The call lasted 10 seconds. No greeting, no name. Just a brief phrase spoken with the kind of clarity that felt pre-planned. Flag timestamp. Initiate passive logging. Observe without interference. He ended the call, slid the phone back into his inner pocket, and resumed his stillness. Robert Hale, seated in 3A, had noticed the entire exchange. A well-traveled executive in his mid-50s, Robert had seen enough corporate meetings and mid-air meltdowns to recognize when something didn't fit. The man in 1B wasn't just a passenger annoyed about a meal. He was methodical, composed, and dangerously unbothered. Robert shifted in his seat and discreetly tapped open his notes app. Just 2 lines. Seat 1B, non-reactive, potential escalation. Watch. Meanwhile, in seat 5A, Sierra adjusted her phone slightly. The comments had picked up. He just made a call. Look at his face. Calm AF. She came back again? Why does she look smug? Someone tagged the airline. At the back of the plane, a clip had begun circulating, 15 seconds long, shaky, captured from over a seat back. It showed Lindsay placing the napkin on Nathaniel's tray with that pointed comment about uniforms. The audio was faint, but enough. The clip hit Twitter at 3:04 p.m. with the caption, "This is first class? At Skyline Airlines needs to explain." Within 10 minutes, the video reached 1,200 views. By the 11th minute, it vanished. The original post showed content removed due to policy violation. Sierra blinked at her screen. "What the hell?" she muttered aloud, refreshing again. In 1B, Nathaniel checked nothing. He made no effort to engage with the digital aftermath already spiraling outside the fuselage. Instead, he unfolded his napkin and dabbed the corner of his mouth, as if nothing had shifted at all. But something had. Somewhere in the airline's internal alert system, a low-level notice had been triggered. An AI bot scanning posts for brand reputation risks had flagged a keyword cluster. First class, black man, moldy food, flight attendant smirk. Someone was watching now, but they weren't watching close enough. Robert narrowed his eyes. The man in 1B wasn't rattled. He was preparing. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as meal trays were collected. A few murmurs passed between seats, passengers quietly noting the strange energy radiating from seat 1B. The tension hadn't exploded. It had calcified, made the air heavier. Then came Craig Nelson. Tall, silver-haired, and sharply uniformed, the flight service manager stepped into first class with the purposeful gait of someone accustomed to authority. He held a small tablet in one hand and a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good afternoon, sir," he said, stopping beside Nathaniel. "We've received a report of a possible service concern. I'd like to verify your details for our records." Nathaniel looked up with the same cool stillness he'd maintained all flight. "My details?" he echoed gently. "Yes, full name and booking confirmation, please, for internal documentation," Craig added, glancing toward the galley where Lindsay pretended not to watch. "I see." Nathaniel picked up his leather portfolio, opened it to a blank page, and clicked his pen. "In that case, I'd like your full name and employee ID for my documentation." Craig's smile twitched. "I'm the onboard flight service manager," he said, slower now. "This is standard protocol." "And I'm a passenger experiencing an issue with the standard," Nathaniel replied evenly. "I'm sure you understand the value of record keeping." Craig hesitated. Around them, heads subtly turned. Eyes shifted. Phones angled slightly. From 5A, Sierra's camera feed caught the entire exchange. Her stream's viewer count had leapt from dozens to hundreds in the past 5 minutes, boosted by people reposting the now-deleted Twitter clip. On her screen, comments began flying. "He just flipped it back on the manager. Smooth. Get that ID number. This is getting good. Had spoiled in first. Trending." Craig cleared his throat, voice tightening. "Sir, I'd prefer not to escalate this. If you're dissatisfied with your meal, we can file a complaint after landing." Nathaniel tilted his head slightly. "You've escalated it by treating a request for food safety like a security threat." Craig's posture stiffened. "Sir, I'm trying to maintain order in the cabin." "Then I suggest beginning with accountability," Nathaniel replied calmly, jotting something down in his notebook. A beat passed. Craig stepped back, visibly frustrated. "I'll follow up with you before arrival." Nathaniel nodded once. "I'll be right here." Craig turned and walked away, his tablet now clutched like a shield. Sierra's live stream crossed 1,200 viewers. Someone reposted her clip with a new caption. "He asked for the manager's ID. Not all heroes yell." The comments section was already running wild. Nathaniel closed his notebook and leaned back, hands folded, eyes half-lidded. He didn't need to raise his voice. He just needed to wait. Lindsay returned for the third time, tray now empty, lips pressed into what she clearly believed was a customer service smile. But the tension around her eyes betrayed something else. Annoyance, maybe even contempt. She stopped beside Nathaniel's seat, her hands resting lightly on the headrest in front of him. "You know," she said, voice syrupy sweet, "it's funny how some passengers always find something to complain about, always so sensitive." Nathaniel looked up, saying nothing. She leaned in slightly. "You people always play the victim." Silence. For one breathless moment, even the hum of the engines seemed to pause. Nearby passengers froze mid-sip, mid-scroll. A flight attendant 3 rows back looked up, eyes wide. Nathaniel didn't move, didn't blink. He reached into his blazer pocket, slowly, deliberately, and retrieved his phone. One tap, camera on. He didn't record, he didn't need to. He simply let the screen reflect her face, her smirk, her posture, her words still hanging like poison in the air. "I'd like to make a formal note of that statement," he said quietly. Lindsay's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" He didn't repeat himself. He didn't have to. In 5A, Sierra's phone shook slightly in her grip. Her live stream had just jumped from 1,200 to 3,000 viewers in under a minute. The chat exploded. She did not just say that. "Rewind, rewind, get the timestamp." Hashtag spoiled in first just hit 10K tweets. On Twitter, the clip, uploaded from a screen recording of Sierra's live, was already trending. Captions ranged from outrage to disbelief. By the time Lindsay walked away, her words had been subtitled, clipped, looped, and posted across 4 platforms. But the real twist hadn't dropped yet. Somewhere in the airline's back-end systems, a ping triggered a message chain. A junior marketing analyst flagged a rising sentiment score. Racial discrimination, first class, passenger mistreatment, viral trend. At 3:38 p.m., an anonymous email hit the inbox of a freelance aviation blogger. The subject line read, "Internal list leaked. Shadow audit. Passenger ID'd." Attached was a screenshot of a redacted internal memo. Skyline Airlines Service Quality Audit Program. Q3 Participant 7, N. Carter. First Class Route ATL or D. Do not disclose. The blogger posted the memo. It took minutes to spread. Within an hour, another layer of the story began surfacing. Nathaniel Carter hadn't been just a random customer. He was, according to the leak, one of 10 anonymous evaluators enlisted by the airline itself to test service under real-world conditions. The internet erupted. "He's a plant?" Skyline tested their own staff and failed. "Oh, this just turned corporate." Nathaniel sat motionless in 1B, watching nothing, seeing everything. He hadn't even played his first card yet. The aisle was quiet, unnaturally so. No one was talking anymore. Phones hovered midair. Wine glasses sat untouched. In seat 1B, Nathaniel Carter uncrossed his legs with smooth control and stood up. His height, understated but commanding. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't ask for attention. Yet every eye in first class found him as if pulled by gravity. He reached into his blazer's inner pocket and withdrew a single card, sleek, minimalist, black with silver embossing. No flourish, no speech. He placed it face down on the meal tray, paused for 3 seconds, then flipped it over. The words shimmered under the soft cabin lighting. Nathaniel Carter, Chief Executive Officer, Carter Dynamics. Fortune 500, Atlanta HQ. A ripple moved through the cabin like a silent detonation. Craig Nelson, who had returned just moments earlier with a fresh attempt at diplomacy, stopped in his tracks. His eyes locked on the card, widened, then darted to Nathaniel's face as the realization landed like a brick. "Oh God," Craig whispered. Deborah, hovering just behind Lindsay, paled. Her clipboard slipped slightly in her grasp. Lindsay stood frozen, mouth slightly open, the tension draining from her face like color washing out of a photo. Her smirk vanished, replaced by the expression of someone watching their career slide off a cliff in real time. Nathaniel didn't gloat. He didn't even smile. He simply folded his hands in front of him. "I understand the need for verification," he said quietly, "especially when passengers look unexpected." The sentence hung heavier than any accusation. He didn't need to say more. Sierra's live stream viewer count surged again, 600, 800 and climbing. Her phone trembled slightly as she whispered, "Y'all, he's the CEO, the CEO." Twitter notifications exploded. "Carter Dynamics? That Carter Dynamics?" Skyline just insulted their biggest partner. Corporate plot twist of the year. Then came the real body blow. A second leak hit social media, a document this time, posted by a verified tech reporter. It detailed an ongoing vendor evaluation, internal memo, Carter Dynamics vendor audit. Subject, Skyline Airlines, Q3 evaluation contract renewal value, 5,000 on plus. Decision deadline, 30 days. The comments turned lethal. So they weren't just rude, they sabotaged a 5M partnership. Skyline is cooked. Nathaniel's gaze swept the room once before he sat down again, slowly, as if the entire confrontation had been a scheduled meeting that just concluded. He tapped once on his phone. In a private Slack channel at Carter Dynamics, a message appeared. "Live incident observed. Staff escalation confirmed. Entering phase 2. He folded his napkin, tucked it beside the tray, and took a sip of water. The card remained on the table, and so did the silence. The card still sat on the tray like a detonated truth. Around him, no one dared to speak. Even the usual rustling of cutlery had ceased, replaced by the quiet tension of reputations unraveling. Nathaniel opened his leather portfolio once more, not to write, but to retrieve a slim, encrypted tablet. It lit up with a fingerprint scan and connected instantly to a secure satellite channel. His fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard. The subject line of the message he composed read, "Field Test Report. Internal Crisis Simulation. Flight 448. To Angela Voss, Executive VP Operations, Carter Dynamics. Thomas Reed, Director, Risk and Ethics. Monica Lee, Chief Compliance Officer." The body of the email was brief but piercing. Observations. Failure of frontline staff to recognize escalation risk. Systemic bias evident in language, tone, and assumption of guilt. Lack of de-escalation training at supervisory level. Live footage and public perception trending negatively. Conclusion. Test almost failed. Systemic bias confirmed. Recommend full internal retraining before contract renegotiation continues, elevating to board. He attached 3 files: a compilation of recorded audio, Sierra's livestream URL, and a time-stamped log of every interaction since boarding. Then, with a final tap, he hit send. It wasn't Skyline Airlines he'd come to evaluate. It was his own company. Carter Dynamics had developed a new internal policy, stress testing every partner and vendor relationship by embedding real-time assessments into actual business operations. It was Nathaniel's idea, born from his own quiet experience of being overlooked one too many times. But this particular flight was different. This wasn't just a vendor test, it was a mirror test. Skyline was a major partner, yes, but more importantly, one of Carter Dynamics' internal teams had recommended them for exclusive expansion across 6 new regions. Nathaniel had raised a concern. What if they don't scale with values? No one could answer definitively. So he'd booked the flight. Alone. No security detail. No title on the manifest. Just an anonymous seat and a silent mission. Now, the data was undeniable. Behind him, Craig stood motionless near the galley. Deborah whispered frantically into a phone. Lindsay had vanished. Nathaniel sipped his water once more and stared ahead, eyes calm but focused. This wasn't about a moldy meal anymore. It was about culture, system design, training, bias baked into procedure, and his company had almost missed it. Sierra's livestream hit 9,000 viewers. In the chat, someone posted, "He's testing them, not to punish, to change everything." Another added, "Best part? They still don't know who's really being tested." Nathaniel locked the tablet and placed it face down beside the card. Phase 3 was about to begin. The plane's engine hummed steadily above the rising storm of digital outrage. Sierra's stream had crossed 10,000 viewers. News outlets were beginning to quote her footage. Nathaniel remained still, fingers loosely interlocked on the tray, a statue of absolute control. Then his phone buzzed. Once, twice. He flipped it over. The caller ID read, Margaret Wu, Skyline HQ. He answered on speaker. "This is Carter," he said. A moment of silence, then her voice filled the air, polished, composed, but unmistakably urgent. "Mr. Carter, this is Margaret Wu, CEO of Skyline Airlines. I've been briefed on the situation currently unfolding aboard Flight 448. At that name, Craig's face drained of color. Deborah's jaw twitched. Lindsay reappeared from the galley, face flushed, lips parted in panic. "I want to begin," Margaret continued, "with a personal and public apology. What you've experienced today is inexcusable and contrary to everything Skyline claims to stand for." Nathaniel didn't respond. The silence invited her to keep speaking, and she did. "We are launching a full investigation. The crew involved will be immediately suspended pending review. I am already assembling our crisis management team to assess compliance breakdowns." Lindsay took a half step forward. "Sir, Mr. Carter, if I had known who you were..." Nathaniel raised one finger. "No," he said softly, but with weight. "You acted as if no one was watching. That's exactly the point." Lindsay froze, her throat tightening. Sierra's comments exploded. "Ooh." Mic dropped. "She's done." Then came the twist no one saw coming. From seat 2C, a woman stood up slowly. She had gone unnoticed until now. Brown curls tucked under a travel hat, beige sweater, oversized glasses. She walked calmly to the front of the cabin, pulled out a sleek silver badge, and turned to face the crew. "Samantha Reed," she said, "Senior Ethics Officer, Carter Dynamics." Craig blinked. I thought you were a passenger." "I am," she replied. "But I'm also part of Mr. Carter's counter-observation team. I've been assessing not just your crew's behavior, but also how Mr. Carter himself handles adversity under real conditions." Deborah took a step back. Margaret's voice on the phone cracked slightly, the illusion of control fading. "You had internal observation running both ways?" "Yes," Nathaniel said, eyes steady. If we demand accountability from others, we must first demand it from ourselves. Craig sank into the jump seat. Deborah turned pale. Samantha held up a tablet. Everything has been documented, visually, verbally, behaviorally. And the report won't just be internal. We'll submit findings to both company boards. Lindsay let out a tiny whimper. Please, I didn't mean, but you did, Samantha said gently. That's why it matters. Nathaniel leaned back in his seat, gaze forward. Transparency, he thought, wasn't about exposure. It was about transformation. The cabin had shifted into something between a courtroom and a documentary set. Sierra's phone trembled in her hands as she tried to keep up with the flood of messages on her live stream. Viewers were losing their minds over what just happened. Wait, she's with him? Ethics officer twist inside a twist? We're watching history. Samantha Reed remained at the front of the cabin, her badge still visible, her tone clinical but firm. To clarify, she began, turning slightly toward the passengers. My presence on this flight was prearranged, not by Skyline, but by Carter Dynamics. Craig looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. You mean, you planted observers on both ends? Yes, Samantha said. It was necessary. Nathaniel remained seated, unmoved, as if all of this had been inevitable. In truth, it had been. Samantha continued. When Mr. Carter proposed a systemic ethics audit, the board agreed on one condition, that he too be monitored during the process. Our job wasn't only to evaluate Skyline's frontline behavior, it was to observe how our CEO would respond under pressure. She paused, scanning the crew's faces. And the results are illuminating. Deborah lowered her eyes. Lindsay swayed slightly on her feet. Craig clutched his tablet but didn't dare look at the screen. Nathaniel finally spoke. It's not enough to ask partners to meet a standard. We have to prove we're willing to be held to it ourselves. Samantha nodded. Which is why I filed the secondary report this morning before takeoff. Subject, Nathaniel Carter, disguised audit participant. Objective, evaluate impartial conduct, emotional regulation, ethical escalation. She turned toward him. You passed, barely. The audience, online and on board, collectively gasped. He was being tested too? This is Inception-level corporate ethics. Both sides tested each other and nobody knew? On the live stream, Sierra read aloud a comment from a verified account. This moment will be taught in business schools for the next 50 years. Margaret Wu, still on speaker, spoke again. Her voice now shook with reverent disbelief. Mr. Carter, I don't know whether to apologize again or ask for a job. He smiled faintly. Neither is necessary. What matters now is how you respond. Not to me, but to the public, to your employees, to your passengers. Samantha added, and to your process. Apologies are reactive. Systems are proactive. Craig finally sank into the jump seat beside the galley, his authority visibly collapsing. Deborah sat beside him, blinking at nothing. Lindsay leaned against the wall, hands trembling. Nathaniel reached into his portfolio and removed one final document. A template for a dual accountability partnership charter, co-signed by both Carter Dynamics and their vendors. He held it out toward the front of the cabin. Let's begin again, he said. And with that, a story that began with mold ended with a manifesto for change. The document in Nathaniel's hand wasn't thick. It was only 4 pages, clean, direct, brutal in its clarity. He placed it on the galley counter as if offering a peace treaty after a war neither side realized they were fighting. Samantha Reed stepped beside him, tapping the corner of the packet. This, she said, isn't a suggestion. It's a non-negotiable baseline for continued partnership. Margaret Wu remained on speaker, her voice sharper now, not in defensiveness, but in clarity. Please walk me through the terms. Nathaniel nodded once. He opened the cover page. Item 1, he began. A real-time passenger feedback system, not just post-flight surveys. A live platform accessible mid-flight that allows passengers to report discriminatory behavior directly to an ethics supervisor, not routed through customer service scripts. He flipped to the second page. Item 2. Mandatory quarterly training for all customer-facing staff, not just modules on paper. In-person, scenario-based training on unconscious bias, cultural awareness, and de-escalation techniques. Craig flinched behind him, as if each bullet point was an indictment. Item 3, Samantha continued. Establishing a formal partnership with at least one civil rights or equity organization. They will co-design policies, advise on accountability, and participate in quarterly evaluations. Margaret exhaled audibly through the speaker. Understood. Nathaniel turned to the final page. Item 4, he said. Creation of a $150,000 annual scholarship fund for underrepresented youth pursuing careers in aviation, hospitality, or ethics, and an independent oversight committee composed of community leaders, legal observers, and external compliance experts, empowered to review all complaints. There was silence. Not resistance, reflection. Margaret Wu responded slowly. We will implement all 4, in full, effective immediately. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. No corporate delays. No delays, she affirmed. We've seen where that path leads. Our system doesn't need an update. It needs a rebuild. Deborah's eyes welled slightly. Lindsay sat down near the emergency exit, too stunned to speak. Even Craig, visibly rattled, gave a tiny nod, as if acknowledging defeat, or maybe release. Nathaniel tapped the document. Then we'll assign a joint implementation team. First reports due within 14 days. Audit ready. Samantha added, and progress must be made public. No hiding behind internal memos. Sierra's live stream, still climbing in numbers, flashed new comments. This is how you change systems. That man didn't raise his voice once. Look what he did. Justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it needs a cabin. Nathaniel picked up the pen beside the charter and signed his name. One slow, deliberate stroke. Then he turned the pages around and placed the pen beside them. Your move, Ms. Wu. From the speaker, consider it signed. 6 months later, Skyline Airlines looked nothing like the company it had been on Flight 448. Passenger complaint rates had dropped by 75%, a number once thought impossible in a service industry. Training compliance hit 100% for all frontline staff. The newly implemented real-time feedback app had processed over 11,000 submissions, with resolution times cut in half. Even the airline's stock price reflected the transformation, up 4.1% since the incident, surprising even Wall Street analysts. But the numbers weren't the story. The people were. Samantha Reed had been promoted to Global Director of Ethics and Inclusion at Carter Dynamics. Her report on Flight 448 became required reading for all new executive hires. Internally, they called it the cabin case. And then there was Sierra Lin, now a freshman at Columbia University, majoring in journalism and digital ethics. Sierra had been awarded the Carter Future Voices Scholarship, created from the very charter Nathaniel proposed on the flight. Her live stream had reached over 1.3 million views, archived by both Harvard and Stanford for use in business ethics curricula. When asked about it on a podcast, she said, I thought I was just filming a rude flight attendant. Turns out, I caught the start of a revolution. That revolution reached its next chapter at the Global Ethics in Business Summit, held at the Georgia World Congress Center, where over 20,000 attendees gathered to discuss corporate accountability in real time. Nathaniel Carter stood alone at center stage. No slides, no title flashing behind him, just a black suit, steady eyes, and the same quiet command he'd held in seat 1B. I've been called many things in boardrooms, he began. But on that flight, I wasn't a CEO. I was a stranger sitting in first class, offered mold and mockery instead of respect. He let the silence linger. It's not about who you are when people know your name, he said. It's about who you decide to be when no one's watching. Applause rippled through the auditorium. Not explosive, but deep and sustained. Respectful, earned. He continued, we didn't fix a company on that flight. We revealed a system, and then, together, we chose to change it. In the crowd, Sierra held her phone at shoulder height, live streaming again. Her caption read, "6 months later, still watching." Back at Skyline HQ, the diversity charter was etched into the lobby wall. Quarterly progress reports were now public. The scholarship fund had supported 9 students already. Flight attendants received bonuses for top-rated feedback and bias training, and passengers, of all races, classes, backgrounds, noticed something subtle but powerful. They were treated like people. That flight became a blueprint. Other airlines followed. Hospitality chains, retail giants. One silent passenger had redefined accountability, not by shouting, but by choosing not to stay silent when silence was easier. Justice didn't arrive in fury. It landed in first class.